We've got a fantastic panel. I've had the pleasure and honor to know many of these folks for a number of years now and work with them, and this is going to be a lot of fun. As I think was mentioned earlier, definitely we're going to do a Q&A section at the end, so feel free to drop any questions you have into the chat, and we'll go through those at the end. But really, to kind of kick off quickly here, as Erica mentioned, the Hyperscale AI program has brought together a diverse set of companies working on some very innovative programs and challenges. When we think about supply chain, often people's core definition is thinking about getting items and things from point A to point B, and that's certainly been in the news a lot lately with supply chain disruptions and things, which we will talk about. But by design, this panel is actually quite diverse, and we'll talk about that in a moment. The goal here was to bring together some leaders that have various perspectives on different elements of supply chain, logistics, productivity, and efficiency in different industries and sectors to make this a very fun and interesting conversation. So we'll kick off. We'll start off with sort of a little bit of a deeper round of introductions. So I'll have everyone kind of just quickly introduce themselves and talk a bit about yourself and your company. And Alexandra, we'll start with you.
Thanks, Rob. Super excited to be here. As people mentioned, physicians. So we're talking about a pretty critical issue at the time of COVID, which is the ability for our organizations to respond to the needs of patients and manage the human chain of people who need to intervene in order to successfully help patients with very complex health issues. And so Care Team was designed to create that project management capacity where each project is a disease that allows the health system to rapidly coordinate a number of people, literally the care team, around patients with very complex health issues like type 1 diabetes, cancer, eating disorders, and just also frail elderly aging at home.
Awesome, thanks. And Patrick, who do you next?
Thanks, Rob. So I've been in the logistics business for the last 20 odd years. Specifically, what Rob was describing was moving different products around the world. And so I founded this company 4 years ago, specifically to look at really where the pain points are. And as most of you know, in the last few years, been a lot of congestion happening at the terminals, supply chain problems in terms of chips and moving products into the country and out of the country. And so the problem I'm trying to solve, of course, is how do I look at automating some of those processes? The shipping business is quite of course, old business with a lot of bricks and mortar. And so the main aim of our platform is looking at how to automate that process, how to digitize that process, and how to apply AI in terms of solving those congestion and supply chain issues.
Awesome, thanks, Patrick. Jake, how about you?
Yeah, so Minerva Intelligence is a software development company, and we have two main focuses. One is in the mining and mineral exploration business, which is obviously important for getting minerals to our supply chain. And then the other focus is on climate risk mitigation and adaptation. And so I've been with the company, one of the first employees when the company was founded in 2017. And so I've seen the company grow and evolve over time. Yeah.
Excellent, thanks. And over to you, Ashish.
Great. Thank you so much, Rob. Thank you, Erica and the BC Tech team. Great to be here. Thank you for having me. My name is Ashish. I'm the founder and CEO of Workforce Wellness. I'm a SaaS entrepreneur, as Erica mentioned earlier. I've had the fortune of working with a number of high growth startups in Vancouver. 2 years ago, started Workforce Wellness. We're focused on helping companies meet new employee demands for flexibility, improved wellness and safety in the workplace. And that's our core focus is bringing a platform that helps employers create workplaces where employees are happy and where they thrive.
Definitely needed. Thanks very much. So we'll peel the onion back a little bit here. And maybe if I could have each of you, starting with Patrick, kind of dive a little bit more into the specific challenges that you're looking to tackle with your company, but primarily with the technology you're building. So Patrick, we'll start with you.
So most of you probably, if you're from the West Coast here in Vancouver, you probably notice a lot of the ships anchored along the shore with these container ships with containers on them. on an annual basis, there's roughly 8 million containers that go through our ports from Vancouver all the way to Halifax. Most of these containers are managed by 13 shipping companies. And a lot of that information is flowed through into and out of the country every single year. But in terms of capturing some of that data, in terms of where these empty containers are around the country, that hasn't been automated yet and in terms of digitized. So what we've done is look at capturing that from the shipping line perspective. And then the users are primarily the rail companies and the trucking companies. And so our platform has automated some of those processes. And the specific challenges that we've, of course, started to face is how do I, number one, gain the trust in terms of that data sharing with the shipping lines. And these are global companies with, some of them over 100 years of history. And so number one was gaining their trust. Number two, we're now at a point where we actually have more business than actually capacity. So number two is how do I look at managing in terms of resources, in terms of dedicating enough IT, in terms of applying that solution. And the third challenge I would say is then looking at identifying and simplifying that problem. And that's where the hyperscale AI has come in terms of looking at AI and machine learning to see how to interpret that data and solving and optimizing some of those empty containers around the country.
Excellent. Thanks very much. And maybe Ashish, back to you. So, you're focusing on a very different but equally as compelling part of this whole problem in a lot of the ways. Maybe if you could tell us a bit more about the deeper dive on the technology you're building and the challenges you're working to overcome.
Sure. Thanks, Rob. So we're looking at, similar to what Alexandra said, the human element of supply chain challenges that companies are facing. So if you look at sort of supply chain challenges across the industry, you can really sort of break it down to the company. Within the company, what you find is sort of the humans are the weak link, the employees are the weak link. So ensuring availability of employees, ensuring employees are committed, engaged, ready to work, not dealing with personal challenges, helping them overcome some of the demands for flexibility in terms of the companies moving to a hybrid arrangement, managing people's schedules, access to direct access to connected care services, so the ability to go from detecting that someone is sick and building sort of the processes, the automated processes, so the company can actually get that employee the care they need, they can recover faster and back to work. And all of this really is delivered through a platform that we've developed that has different components that work together to make it easy for employers. So we built a personalized employee app that is totally controlled by the employer. We built a marketplace that helps employers access services that they can roll out to employees and provision those services very, very easily. So we're just building the infrastructure that enables employers to track this transition, make a seamless shift to the new way of working. But ultimately, it's about maximizing employee output. And what we found talking to a number of employers is that a lot of the experiences or challenges they're having around supply chain actually relate to the availability of people. So solving for that really helps in the kind of the bigger challenge of the output that the company's having, which relates to their supply chain challenges.
Excellent. Thanks very much. And Alexandra, I think it's somewhat adjacent to that, but on sort of maybe a deeper, more medical level. Maybe give us a little more deep dive into the challenges you're working on.
100%. One of the biggest misconceptions about the healthcare system is that it's actually a system. It's really not. It's a collection of individual people and organizations that have to then figure out how do they collaborate around the patient who has to have them involved separately or transfer from one to the other as they get from diagnosis to treatment, to management, ongoing care. And so that careful dance right now is done largely with phone calls and faxes and human-powered methods that are deeply inefficient and make everyone miserable because they're not practicing to the top of their license. And so a lot of what Care Team built is a lot of that efficiency of how do you actually effectively figure out who else is involved in the care of the person, what do they know, what are they doing, what are they recommending, and how can we create a unified view that creates almost like a 360 of the person, but around the person, not around the organization treated the person. So it's beyond the walls of the hospital or the clinic. And the interesting part around AI is not just the ability to make that system more efficient, but to start adding prediction to it, which is, let's imagine the average clinic having anywhere from 3,000 to 20,000 patients. Right now, we have to guess as to which one of those patients is going to do okay and which one needs additional help. And some of that guess comes from severity of disease or maybe social determinants of health, some of those diversity, equity type of factors where we try and understand maybe they're an immigrant, maybe they're low income, and try and guess because a lot of that information is not available. What we built through this project is actually a multimodal prediction engine that allows us to start taking into account a whole bunch of different variables and to start having a real lens as to who is really having a hard time and where should the humans involved, the clinicians, spend more time supporting them, because those are the patients struggling. Not some immigrants, amazing education, background, resources, and funding, they don't need additional help. Some people who don't look like they're struggling on paper are struggling because they're depressed, scared, or anxious. And that sort of capacity of putting in so many different factors and then creating a predictive score is incredibly complicated. And that's the only thing that's the right tool for AI to tackle to help humans better start understanding patterns and where they can intervene and create a learning system.
Excellent, thanks. And certainly, in the last couple of years, we've all probably had to get in touch with the healthcare system more than we perhaps were in previous times. So certainly can understand and appreciate the desire for efficiency and better outcomes. Jake, over to you. I think you guys have been doing some very interesting things. Another component of again, delivering goods and services and also helping on the climate side. Maybe tell us a bit more about the depth of how the technology you guys are using and how you're addressing some of these challenges.
Yeah, sure. Really interesting to hear the diversity of backgrounds that all kind of tie into supply chain. I'll just start by talking about Driver, which is our tool for 3D analysis and visualization of geology data. And really what that's doing is helping geologists be more efficient in their search for mineral deposits. And we use a combination of unsupervised machine learning techniques as well as spatial and geostatistics, basically to predict what's happening underground. We have known sample points in one location, another sample point in another location. We're looking to predict what's in between that so that the geologist can understand what's happening underground. And from a supply chain perspective, I think this is really important application because it's helping the advancement of different mining projects, as well as the discovery of new projects. And we're looking down the barrel of copper shortages, lithium shortages, cobalt shortages, especially as we try to electrify our economy. And if we want to continue to do that, we need to have access to these resources and have these minerals coming into our economy. And then, the other side of our business is looking at climate risk. So we're looking at predicting wildfires, floods, all sorts of different natural hazards that are being exacerbated by climate change for all of Canada. And I think that as we look to make sure that our infrastructure is more climate resilient and making sure that we don't have the type of events like last fall where we had this big flood in BC that held up our supply chain for months and months, we need to make sure that we're understanding where our climate risks are so that we can be more adaptive and look to mitigate those.
Very cool. Thanks very much. And we'll come back to you maybe because you're on sort of the AI topic, which is cool. When for folks that may be on the session here that aren't as deep in artificial intelligence, there's so much has exploded in AI and machine learning in the last decade. Some massive changes occurred in 2012, led by some Canadian researchers that really kind of or an inflection point in growing AI. We often think about AI being in, natural language processing, so looking at written and spoken text, computer vision, being able to analyze, imagery and video, prediction models, neural networks, things like that. Jake, you kind of talked a bit about some of the AI you're doing, but are there any things you can dive into that are either challenges or benefits that you could kind of describe to other founders or folks in the call, or anything else about your platform from an AI perspective that you can kind of give insight into?
Yeah, well, I think I'll have a bit of an interesting take on this. When I started out with Minerva, we were very focused on applying a specific branch of AI called cognitive AI or symbolic AI, working with symbols or words to do some reasoning. And so we were really focused on building out a specific tool set, and we kind of went out with that tool set looking for areas to apply. And that's kind of how we landed with applications in fairly different domains, climate risk and mining. But as we evolved and grew those products, we really started to shift towards a kind of more product focused mindset, building off of our clients' feedback. And that led us to shift almost entirely away from the cognitive AI technology and allowed us to focus on other AI techniques and in some cases non-AI algorithms. And I guess the problem or the lesson to be learned from this is that you shouldn't be looking at any piece of technology, whether it's AI or anything else, from kind of that perspective. You don't want to be the hammer looking for the nail. And I see a lot of that when people are coming to AI and machine learning, is they have a bunch of data and they're wanting to get all the benefits that they hear they can get from AI and machine learning. And I think that we maybe hear this a lot, but it's important that you come to it with a specific problem, and hopefully there's some data along with that, and then you find the right people that can help you solve that problem. And whether it's using AI and machine learning or using all sorts of other techniques that are appropriate from data science and otherwise. So I think that's the approach. And that's not to say that in operations and logistics, AI isn't going to help, because I think there are some amazing applications out there for AI in those fields. But it's just about not being too focused on the application and more on the problem.
No, that's great. I appreciate that. It's interesting, because when AI blew up again about 10 years ago, people just formed companies, and based on the number of AI PhDs they had, they were selling at X million dollars per PhD. And then it evolved into, again, science projects looking for a problem. So the hammer looking for a nail. And I think what's been awesome about this team and this program has been, it's very much applied. It's very much the AI as an ingredient into a very powerful product or tool set. So Alexandra, you talked a little bit about the AI in your platform as well, but maybe you could expound on that a bit more and tell us a bit about, again, perhaps some of the benefits or challenges that you've seen in your platform applying AI, and some experiences you could share with other folks on the meeting today.
I really like the perspective that was just shared about thinking about AI as a set of tools and figuring out when do you apply which one, and more importantly, what data do you have? Is it ready, and is it really representative of what you're trying to accomplish? And so I advise a number of companies who literally start and want to start your AI from the scratch, but you need data in order to be able to then train the AI on it and then assess. There's a step where you need to verify that your assumptions actually work out, as opposed to just saying like, we've applied the tool and that's now working. One of the biggest issues we have in healthcare and AI is that people want to apply it on the overall population of patients, but your diabetic patients or cancer patients are not the same depending on location, depending on type of practice, depending on regulatory. And so a lot of these apps that are being built that have AI built in are actually potentially going to cause harm, because the population of patients in which they was developed doesn't reflect the reality of the clinical set. And so if you practice in BC and you're in Surrey and you don't have something that acknowledges that so many of your patients come from the India, Pakistani type of genetic pool, and they have a very particular set of combination of diabetes and hypertension and whatnot. And so you need to be able to create an AI that is a micro, sort of applies on a per clinic, per disease type of population of patients. And then the question becomes, well, do you have enough data in order to create something meaningful? And we have found that, yes, depending on if your platform captures enough inputs, even a small population of 2,000 patients can give you enough to start creating pattern matching and predictive type of analytics around what and how can be helped to identify the patients who need more help within that group. And that's really hard to do because it's almost like a formula for an AI that you can then apply in different settings, but then you need to validate in every setting that it is indeed working the way it was intended to work. It's not a macro AI that you can just throw and say, this disease, this type of moment in the disease, and it will work everywhere the way it was designed. So we were very fortunate to partner with SFU Big Data and Dr. Fred Popovich and his team, because that's why it's so complicated. It's not that we can't just apply AI ourselves, but this is where the grant was helpful to test a new way of doing things and show that it works, but validate it not just for ourselves as a company, but work with an academic partner who could tell us that, yes, you're on the right track.
And that's such a great point. Back to the early days of computing, one of the first things anyone was ever taught was, garbage in, garbage out. And on the AI world, that's even more important because if we don't have the right data, you're in a lot of trouble. There's been a lot of interesting developments around, synthetic data. In medical, it's really tough because you have to make sure it's not person identifiable. There's all these other challenges. Maybe Patrick, over to you, because you definitely, with your career and sort of purview over the world of real logistics. Tell us a bit about maybe some benefits or challenges or opportunities you've seen in the application of AI and machine learning to the challenges you're working on.
So I definitely agree with what Alexandra and Jake talked about, because I actually came from a very different approach in terms of looking at AI. I came from more of a bottoms up approach because when I started this company, really what I was trying to solve was, where are the pain points in the current problem for shipping, for supply chain? And so I really approached it from that standpoint. And so my target was really the trucking companies, the shipping lines, the railway companies, and trying to automate that process and capturing that data. And so I try to balance between, how to provide an actual operational function value for them, versus more just collecting data. And so that was sort of my initial approach, is how do I provide a solution? And so as I started to go down that route, then I started to think about, okay, if I have that actual data set, it goes back to what you were saying, Jake, what do I do with that data set? But I always have to go back to what problem I'm trying to solve. And then, of course, the problem I'm trying to solve is, how do I look at efficiency in terms of moving those boxes, moving those products around Canada or into or out of the country. And so the challenge, I would say, is because there's 8 million containers coming into the country, every container that touches a single point in terms of location generates another 40 different points. So you're looking at 40 times 8 million. That's a lot of data points. And of course, trying to distill exactly what problem I'm trying to solve becomes more of an issue, where then I can look at applying this specific AI techniques, the specific AI modeling that I need to. For example, we talked about sort of the weather aspect. And so now I'm trying to couple that with, how do I look at everything from a descriptive model, where what our model has today, to a predictive model, and then to a prescriptive model, where then I could advise the shipping lines or the trucking companies or the railway, this is what I think the scenario would bring in terms of the solution.
That's excellent. Thanks. It's just as an anecdote, it's odd how highly weather correlates to so many different things. We do work in cybersecurity risk prediction in a enterprise's supply chain. And even though there's no causation, you can find weather actually correlates really highly with different types of cyber attacks and things in different jurisdictions. You know, political unrest, civil unrest, weird things. It's quite amazing. So Ashish, over to you. You've got, again, you're looking at the human element of it from a sort of different perspective. Maybe tell us a bit about how you're thinking about AI and machine learning in the context of your solution.
Sure. Thanks, Rob. I would just like to echo what's been said already, but what I would add is from our perspective, you know what, AI, it's not, we don't look at AI just, you know, using AI for the sake of AI. It's actually quite complex to introduce machine learning. You need to, you know, have a lot of data. It needs to be clean, like you said, garbage in, garbage out. So what we're looking at, we're not using AI today or machine learning today. What we're doing is figuring out exactly how we would want to implement it and actually building the infrastructure to collect it. So it's part of our roadmap coming up in Q1 and Q2. We will be starting to introduce more ML. What we're looking at, just for context, what we're looking at in terms of how to apply it and where its value is, I think, as Alexander said, it can really help from a sort of a pattern recognition perspective. So if you're looking at a problem and you're trying to identify patterns that would be really hard for either a human or a group of humans to see, AI can be really, really useful. I think, as Patrick and Jake mentioned, it can sort of give you sort of visibility into the future, become more predictive and prescriptive. So we're sort of looking at, we're gathering information about for thousands of employees. Like, so we work with organizations that have large numbers of employees. For each employee, we're gathering a lot of data around, you know, where, like, the work status, if they're working or not working on a specific day or a specific hour of a specific day, their health status, if they're sick, or more specifically, even what kind of symptoms they're having. We're soon going to be getting into sort of emotional status or mood status. So taking, you know, hundreds of data points per employee, multiply that by the number of employees, multiply that by, you know, the number of times we're kind of checking in with each employee and so on. We end up with a really, really large and very interesting data set about, you know, employees and use, you know, when they're sick, how long it'll take them to get back, what other factors might be impacting either their level of output, or maybe even one of the key ones for us is retention. Essentially from a, you know, looking through the lens again of supply chain, when a company loses an employee, they're not thinking, oh, what will the impact on my supply chain be? But the reality is there's a very strong link between losing employees that might take institutional knowledge. You know, new people have to be hired. They have to be retrained. Projects that they might be working on, the person that left, you know, the impact of that. So from our standpoint, we're kind of in the planning phases. We're collecting the data. We're building out, you know, what kinds of predictions we would like to get for employers that would be most helpful around retention, availability, return to work, and general sort of employee engagement with the company, and building out sort of foresight for employers so they can mitigate around those things that'll definitely impact, you know, availability of, or just general output, total employee output, but specifically how that would impact their bottom line. So for us, I would say we're representative of a large number of companies that are kind of looking at AI and how it can play a role, but I would definitely second everything that's been said. It's got to be, you know, you have to have a very, very clear idea what you're trying to achieve, and then, you know, build sort of the modeling and the data, the infrastructure that you need, and then start to use that, and then obviously validate. But anyway, so we're just kind of on that path, and soon to be introducing more sort of ML more than AI, but yeah, in the next few months.
Well, that's great. And I think it's great advice too for anyone that is considering it. I think they're, you know, in the kind of early days of AI, so many organizations jumped into it without having or knowing what the data sets were, how they can actually use them, being much more intentional about it. If you have that capability, so you know how to collect the data, where to collect it, how to store it, how to anonymize, all the things you need to do, I think is some very good advice. So really quick, it'd be great to kind of hear from everyone. One of the neat things about this Hyperscale AI program is that is a little bit of funding for all the different companies to do different things with the funding, everything from AI ML development to kind of go to market. Alexander, you kind of mentioned a little bit about working with SFU's big data teams. Maybe we'll start with you. Tell us, maybe tell us a little bit more about how you're able to kind of work with that team and the kind of outcomes you had that helped to kind of move you guys forward.
Well, working with academic experts is great because they ask you all kinds of tough questions you hadn't even thought of thinking of. And so there was a lot of benefit to even being able to explain how our technology works to someone else for them to understand, and then create documentation around that. Because now that we're hiring more devs and engineers, it's a useful tool for us. And so that was a slam dunk, unexpected benefit of being in the program. But the second thing is, we interviewed a number of different people around who and how to partner with. And it was an interesting choice to go with an academic partner who could also deliver functionality that is ours to keep, because it has that dual capacity of both doing the thing, but helping us in healthcare. It's inevitable that we will have to present, demonstrate outcomes. And so the academic component is really important for us. And that was a great fit. And then just working through the issues in a true partnership where you could actually ask quote unquote dumb questions and have the experts explain them to you from their perspective, because they are top of their game in the big data and AI space. And so you can never you're hiring people, and I've dealt with consultants or other projects where they make you feel really dumb about what you are asking. But it was great to actually have a relationship with someone who can say, well, it's interesting you asked this. This is either the explanation, or why are you asking that question? What is the real question you're trying to answer through this project? And so that guidance was really powerful. It was great to have a short project because it's almost like a test of the relationship, and to see whether it's working or not working. When we first heard about this program, I said, like, how much can you really accomplish in such a small window of time with that limited amount of funding? And I can now say a lot. And so the time went by very fast, but we were able to fast track an initial project and decide on next steps. We plan to continue working with them because they were a great partner to deepen that relationship. And instead of bringing a number of people to our own organization in a part-time capacity who may not be the best at what they do, is partner with someone who has asset of a set of great students and PhDs and others who are in that space, who can be supervised by experienced professors to do the kind of work that we need to do as a small company that will be meaningful to us and much better quality, trying to substitute it on our own.
That's great. Thanks. I was really excited when I got your email at the end when you said how well it went. So that was great. Jake, your team, you were more on the other end of the spectrum, which is a little bit more of a go-to-market project. Maybe tell us a bit about your experience and where hopefully the program helped you guys out.
Yeah, totally different. For us, it was really just an opportunity to reevaluate how we're presenting ourselves to the world. The last couple of years, a lot has changed and shifted in our company. Really been focused on kind of updating our product-focused websites, and that left our company Minerva website a little bit out of date. So it was a really great opportunity for us to kind of just reframe how we tell the Minerva story to the public. And I think that'll be really helpful for making sure that we're telling a cohesive message both to our clients, the public, and our investors. Yeah.
That's great. Thanks. And Ashish, we'll turn to you. We just for in the audience, we tucked Ashish's company in the last minute into the program. So we're putting him on the spot a little bit because he's the newest entrant, but maybe you can kind of prognosticate and tell us a bit about where you're going with the program and what you hope to achieve.
Sure. Thanks, Rob. So as Rob mentioned, we're new to the program, really excited to be a part of it. We're looking at sort of longer term, I would say the prognostication piece, as I mentioned earlier, doing more ML oriented projects that will help us build predictive analytics that'll help employers. Currently, we're using the grant, which we're really appreciative of and excited to have. We're applying that to more sort of go-to-market activities, primarily explaining what we do. It's a brand new platform. It enables new capabilities that employers are not used to. They're used to kind of boring dashboards or boring sort of enterprise software. This is totally different, real time, dynamic, personalized apps, lots of sort of new capabilities they didn't have. So we're applying this grant to sort of go-to-market activities in terms of building out to marketing assets. But our longer-term hope is to work with Scale and do more ML and AI-oriented work.
Excellent, thanks. And Patrick, last but not least, I know Patrick had a massive product launch in October, which kind of has set the stage for his ability to kind of move ahead. So maybe tell us a bit about how you're going to be, you are, and going to be continuing to work with the program.
Yeah, I would say there's three things, Rob. The first thing was how I looked at really the hyperscale AI program was it was almost like an MVP type of modeling, where I wanted to apply the data sets that we were collecting, and because we were generating revenue from our platform already, how to actually look at the efficiencies of getting that data set and apply a roadmap moving forward for 2023 and 24. The second thing was that became a model for us to look at further funding from the federal government as well. Because if we're successful in terms of this testing for this hyperscale program, then we could look at applying further funding. And so that was sort of the second piece of it. The third piece is that I would say that it also, going back to my original point, a lot of the functionality and so our growth as a platform is really reliant on the trust in terms of the shipping lines and the railway companies and the trucking community. And so part of building that trust is to look at how do we look at augmenting our existing product lines that we have for the community in terms of looking at something that they have never thought about. And so using this grant, it allows us to show them in terms of our roadmap what it can look like and what it can do for them as a stakeholder in that supply chain piece.
That's great, thanks. And it's great to hear, because I think this was the second year we've run the program, and looking back on cohort 1 from last year as well, so many of the companies were able to kind of leverage what they accomplished in this program to actually go get further funding, advance, continue working with the consultant they worked with, et cetera. Now, just really, we're going to move to kind of like the last question. Maybe we'll do it sort of as quickly as we can. We're a little over time. We want to get to some Q&A. But the proverbial crystal ball here. Obviously, the world we've gone through a lot in the last couple of years. We're facing some uncertain economic times. There's been a lot of the ground is sort of, as we say, shifting under our feet here. Maybe we'll go around the table really quick and ask everyone, how is the current, economic climate and what's happening in the world impacting you, and what are you sort of looking towards in 2023? And Ashish, maybe we'll start with you.
Sure, thanks. So, we're seeing what everyone else is seeing. There's a lot of warnings about clouds further ahead, economic downturn potentially. We think this is the time when companies have to tighten their belts, but they also look at bringing more efficiencies. So there's always a little bit of a silver lining if you know where to look. So we're actually looking at how we can help companies be more efficient with the employees they have. Like I said earlier, create more output from the employees they have them be more engaged and so on. I think from the general sort of outlook that we see, there is, I think, a much greater appreciation. I think COVID sort of taught us sort of the interdependencies we have on each other and the impact of a viral illness that is now endemic. So I think that's something to keep an eye on. I think living within the endemic illness means it'll basically flare up, and it's like a fire. It'll go sort of in and out or grow and shrink. So I think it's important to appreciate that we're not out of the woods, and there's some challenges ahead in terms of managing that. I think just more broadly, I would say we just have to have a greater appreciation for how interdependent our economy is, the different industries. So one thing happening in one area can actually have an effect 2 industries away. So really understanding, for companies and industries to really understand, what are the links that they have to others? So what are the upstream and downstream industries from them, and what happens to their industry, how that has a ripple effect. It's hard to kind of act on that day to day, but even just having that understanding, you can make much better decisions about what you do next as you navigate the challenges that are coming in the next year or two.
Well, thanks very much. Patrick, we'll go to you, and you've obviously been in the eye of this, kind of supply chain storm. So, love to hear from you what you're sort of seeing.
Well, it's interesting, Rob, because before COVID, nobody knew what supply chain was, and now, of course, everybody knows and talks about supply chain. I just came back from Europe and Asia in the last few weeks, just to get a sense in terms of what that global economic turn can look like in 2023, 2024. Talking to a lot of our clients globally, because they are global shipping companies. And I think most of them have said, it's obviously a bit of a downturn, as everybody expects. But I would say that the supply chain challenges, the congestion, we haven't really solved it yet. It's just slowed down because of the economy. But things will pick up probably Q3, Q4, 2023, or maybe later. But the fundamentals aren't solved in terms of those challenges. And so I think now is the time for us anyway, to look at taking this breather to reevaluate. And so the project that I'm doing, the hyperscale AI, in terms of the project, is really good timing for us, because we expect that the cycle is going to pick up again late next year. And so we hope that some of those data sets and analytics and predictive modeling can then be applied and look at better decision making when the economy picks up again. And I know, of course, it will, as it always does.
Excellent, thanks. And again, Jake, you've got an interesting purview from your company. What are your sort of insights and crystal ball predictions for next year?
No crystal ball predictions, but I'll say it's definitely been a challenging time. Minerva is publicly traded on the Toronto Ventures Exchange, and public tech companies have been taking a beating, and especially small ones. So it's been tough, and we're approaching this challenge by really tightening our belts and narrowing our focus. That's one kind of core aspect, and I think that's a huge opportunity. But it has meant that we've had to let some talented people go, and that's never easy. So, challenging times, but we'll see where it takes us.
Thanks very much. And again, last but certainly not least, Alexandra, how are you seeing things in the coming year?
I'm going to tie it in with Mike Gomez's question about sort of other applications of AI that make your company potentially more efficient or resilient in turbulent times. And I think that, the future belongs to people who embrace the next trend. And so AI is today sort of a shiny new object for many people. It's somewhat science fiction for others. And I think it's just the reality that the future will be the same way as everyone today uses websites and the intranet and has smartphones. We will all be using AI in some capacity. And the company's bet on AI makes us more resilient and more capable to find the best customers, to do more sales. And beyond the optimization that it provides to our customers, it is an important parameter for the company to invest in order to make us more competitive in Canada, but also globally. You are on mute. The most common sentence.
Thank you. No, the actual good segue into the Q&A, and just based on time, this may be maybe a good question for everyone to kind of go around. If the group can see it here, Mike's question was, are there other applications of AI that you've seen or evaluating that can help make a company more efficient or resilient in these turbulent times? Not to put you on the spot, but Ashish, you're not muted. I'll ask you.
Could you repeat the question? I'm
yes.
sorry. There's a little break here on this end.
Yeah, are there other applications of AI that either you've seen in your working career or you're currently evaluating that can help make a company more efficient or resilient in sort of these turbulent times?
I would say, I think it's a good idea to look at how your operations work And then I think this was mentioned earlier, but find opportunities where there is enough data, you've got a clear problem that you need solving, and then apply it. I think there is a bit of a misnomer that AI can solve for things it can't really solve, or that it's kind of a broad brush. I think it's best applied, in a more sort of sniper-like fashion, or more surgical-like fashion. So I wouldn't say there's specific things we're looking at. I think it's best to keep an open mind, but go back to operations, try and find inefficiencies that could use improving, and then on a case-by-case basis, find opportunities to optimize for those. And if ML or AI makes sense, use those. I wouldn't sort of just embrace it wholeheartedly just for the sake of it. But that's something you mentioned earlier.
No, good advice. Jake or Patrick, do either of you want to jump in on that question?
Yeah, I would agree with what Ashish was saying. I think what I was thinking about was more on the shipping logistics, where you break it down into sales, operations, accounting, and different segments in your department. What I've seen, for example, in the documentation, at least in our industry, is that there's some companies that have started to apply AI in terms of looking at efficiency, in terms of data editing. And so every time you're shipping a product from A to B, typically there's a document called bill of lading. And so I've seen some technologies being applied to that, where rather than having a person editing it, you've got a machine that actually looks at editing that process, whether it's a letter of credit, whether it's a bill of lading, whether it's a record. And so that, of course, can improve on the efficiency. But again, that's just one example of how it can apply that technique. But again, it's identifying where you see that efficiency happening in terms of the departments in your organization.
Oh, that's great. Thank you very much. Jake, any comments?
Not too much in particular, but I guess the one thing that I've been thinking about related to this, and maybe it's just because I'm not too familiar with the world, but I was thinking that something, some sort of application in, assessing budgets and budget variance, and maybe SAP does some work in this world, or I'm sure there's lots of big players, but I think that could be an interesting way that companies could be looking at applying AI to look at how they've performed on their past budgets, and seeing, what sort of work regression could do, or other applications on their budget variances to see, where budgets are under and overperforming. I don't know. Maybe there's lots of people who are working on that.
No, and maybe just as a quick final ending point, there, for folks in the audience, there are so many, niche applications now that are, improving everything from marketing and sales. In our AI C Council group, we have Copilot AI, phenomenal if you're doing LinkedIn outreach for sales and marketing, sales enablement. Phenomenal tool to help improve efficiency, do more with less. On the marketing side, there's all sorts of great tools out there, and that everything from blog content writing all the way to being more effective with your marketing and sales. So what we've really seen is there are these these growth opportunities in niche markets that can have a real big impact on companies being able to make sure they can do more with less in these kind of challenging times.
You